My grandma left me $5 million. I raced home to tell my husband, but I overheard him, his sister, and his mother plotting to trick me, steal it all, and leave me destitute. They had no idea I heard. The silence in my grandmother's house was the heaviest thing I'd ever known. It wasn't an empty silence. It was full of memories, thick with the scent of lavender and old books that clung to the air like a final, fading hug. I stood in the middle of her sun-drenched living room, my hand resting on the worn, floral fabric of her favorite armchair. For 32 years, this was my sanctuary. Now, it was a museum of a life that was gone. My life. My grandmother, Evelyn, had been my entire world since I was 7. I have only foggy, fractured memories of my parents before the car crash, my father's laugh, the scent of my mother's perfume. What I remember with perfect clarity is arriving on Evelyn's doorstep, a small, terrified girl clutching a stuffed rabbit with one button eye. She didn't just open her door. She opened her entire life. A successful landscape architect on the cusp of starting her own firm, she put it all away. Her drafting table was replaced with a kitchen table covered in my finger paintings. Her blueprints were traded for bedtime stories. I remember one night, soon after I arrived, I woke up crying from a nightmare. She didn't just comfort me. She took me outside into the cool night air, wrapped in a quilt. She pointed up at the sky, her voice a warm, steady melody against the chirping crickets. "You see that, Amelia?" she whispered, tracing the Big Dipper with her finger. "That's your anchor. No matter how dark it gets, some things are constant. Your roots are with me now. We'll grow towards the sun together." She didn't just give me a home. She gave me roots and a sky. She built me a tree house in the ancient oak in the backyard, a place where she'd bring me lemonade and listen to my childhood secrets as if they were the most important news in the world. As I grew, so did my devotion to her. It was a debt of love I was more than happy to repay. When my friends were going off to college parties, I was often home, making sure Evelyn took her blood pressure medication. When she was diagnosed with arthritis that made her beloved gardening impossible, I became her hands, tending to her roses and tomato plants, describing the color of each bloom for her. The biggest sacrifice, the one I never called a sacrifice, came 5 years ago. I'd been awarded a prestigious art curation fellowship in New York, a dream I had nurtured through 4 years of art history studies. The acceptance letter felt like a golden ticket. But Evelyn's health had taken a turn. She was more forgetful, her steps less steady. I remember sitting at her kitchen table, the acceptance letter on one side, her weekly pill organizer on the other. I looked at her, dozing lightly in her armchair, her breathing soft and rhythmic. There was no real choice to be made. I mailed back a polite refusal, citing personal reasons. I never told her about the offer. Her peace of mind was worth more than any gallery in Manhattan. It was during those years I met Mark. He was charming, handsome, and seemed to understand my commitment to Evelyn. Or so I thought. His family was another story. They were polished. His mother, Eleanor, was a woman who seemed to be sculpted from cool marble, her life dedicated to maintaining their family's social standing. His older sister, Jessica, was a sharp-tongued corporate lawyer who looked at me as if I were a curious but slightly disappointing science experiment. They never approved, but they were too well-bred to say it outright. Instead, their disapproval came in 1,000 tiny cuts. I remember one Sunday dinner at their large, sterile house. I was talking about a new program I'd started at the community college where I taught, helping senior citizens learn digital art. Eleanor smiled thinly, a smile that never reached her eyes. "How quaint," she'd said, taking a delicate sip of wine. "It's a shame your little community college job doesn't pay more, dear. Mark has such expensive taste." Mark just squeezed my hand under the table, a gesture that was meant to be comforting but felt like a gag order. Jessica was more direct. She once looked at a dress I'd bought from a local consignment shop, a piece I genuinely loved. "That dress is surprisingly stylish for a thrift store find," she commented, her signature tight, knowing smile playing on her lips. "Good for you." The unspoken addendum, "for someone like you," hung in the air between us. When I tried to talk to Mark about it later, he'd sighed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "You're too sensitive, honey. That's just how they are. They're just looking out for us. Looking out for him, maybe. Evelyn saw it all. She never said a word against them. But I'd see a flicker of concern in her eyes when I'd recount a story from dinner at their house. Just remember your own worth. Amelia, she told me once, her hand covering mine. Don't let anyone make you feel you have to audition for a place at their table. You build your own. Her passing was peaceful, in her sleep, but it ripped a hole through my universe. I organized the funeral, a celebration of her life, with every detail she would have loved. A string quartet playing Vivaldi, centerpieces of roses from her own garden. The in-laws' presence was a study in performance. Eleanor drifted through the mourners, her face a mask of tragic grace, whispering to a cousin about the impressive cost of the mahogany casket. Jessica spent most of the reception on her phone, occasionally glancing up to offer a curt nod to a colleague she'd spotted across the room. Mark stood beside me, his arm around my shoulders, but his comfort felt hollow, rehearsed. He was there, but he wasn't with me. In a room full of people, I felt the chilling loneliness of being the last one left, the final keeper of our shared world. Standing there, I had no idea that my grief was just the calm before a storm that would tear down everything I thought I knew about love, family, and betrayal. A week after the funeral, the world was still muted, colors seeming less bright without Evelyn in them. I received a call from a Mr. Harrison, my grandmother's attorney. He asked me to come to his office to discuss her will. I was surprised she even had one. Evelyn lived a life of profound frugality. Her clothes were mended, her car was 2 decades old, and her idea of a splurge was buying brand-name tea bags. Mr. Harrison's office was the opposite of Evelyn's world. It was a hushed, mahogany and leather sanctuary downtown. He was a kind-faced man in his 60s with eyes that held a gentle wisdom. First, he handed me a thick, cream-colored envelope. She insisted you read this before anything else, he said softly. My fingers trembled as I recognized Evelyn's elegant, looping script spelling my name. I opened it. The letter wasn't about money or possessions. It was about love. She wrote about the day I arrived on her doorstep, not as a burden, but as the second great purpose of her life. She wrote about my laughter filling the quiet halls of her house. She told me she was proud of the woman I'd become, strong, compassionate, and full of a light I didn't always see in myself. Tears streamed down my face, hot and cleansing, each word a final gift. I love you more than all the stars we used to count, the letter finished. Now go and build a life that makes you happy. Truly happy. I was still clutching the letter to my chest when Mr. Harrison cleared his throat gently. Amelia, he began, sliding a thick binder across the desk. Your grandmother was a school librarian, but she was also an exceptionally shrewd and patient investor. She started with a small inheritance from her own father 60 years ago and managed it with incredible skill. He paused, letting the weight of his next words settle. Her total estate, of which you are the sole beneficiary, is valued at $5.2 million. The words didn't compute. They sounded like a foreign language. I must have misheard. I'm sorry, what? I stammered, my mind reeling. $5,200,000, he repeated, his expression unwavering. It's all yours, Amelia. She wanted you to have a life of security, free from worry. The room tilted. $5.2 million. My frugal, cardigan-wearing grandmother was a secret millionaire. My first coherent thought, after the initial shockwave, was one of pure, unadulterated joy. Not for me, but for us. For Mark. This was it. This was the answer to all our quiet struggles. He could finally quit his high-stress construction management job and start the design studio he'd always dreamed of. We could buy a house, a real home, not the cramped apartment we rented. We could be free. I thanked Mr. Harrison in a daze, the binder feeling impossibly heavy in my arms. I all but ran out of his office, my heart pounding with excitement. I had to tell Mark. I wanted to see his face, to share this incredible, life-altering moment. I decided not to call to tell him in person. I drove straight to his parents' house, knowing he was there helping his father with a project. Their house was a large, modern colonial, all sharp angles and pristine landscaping. It was a house designed to impress, not to comfort. I parked in the driveway and practically skipped to the back of the house, heading for the patio door that led into the kitchen. I could already picture his grin. As my hand reached for the cold, steel handle, I heard their voices from inside. They were sharp, urgent. I froze. It was Jessica speaking. "You need to handle this perfectly, Mark. I've already looked it up. No prenup means she's vulnerable. We get her to open a joint investment account. We use our financial advisor, not hers. It has to be airtight." A cold dread, slick and oily, began to seep into my veins. Then, Eleanor's voice, smooth as poisoned silk. "It's for the good of the family. That money is wasted on someone with no ambition. She'd probably just fritter it away. It can secure our legacy, Mark. Your legacy." My breath hitched. This couldn't be happening. I was in a nightmare. I heard Mark, his voice hesitant, a sliver of the man I thought I married. "But tricking her? And then divorcing her? That feels cruel." It was a short, sharp laugh. "Jessica, oh, grow up. She'll get over it. We'll give her a small settlement to look generous. You can finally leave her and find someone on your level, someone who compliments you. Think of the life you deserve, not the one you settled for." The world went silent. All I could hear was the frantic, panic drumming of my own heart. I prayed he would defend me, that he would tell them they were monsters. I waited. The silence stretched for an eternity. And then his voice came, and it was a voice I had never heard before. It was calm, cool, and utterly foreign. It was the voice of a stranger. "You're right," he said. "She always chose that old woman over me anyway. It's time I got what I'm owed." The world didn't just tilt, it shattered. The joyful energy that had propelled me there evaporated, replaced by an arctic cold that started in my chest and spread through my entire body. I felt my knees weaken. The binder with my new life, my new fortune, suddenly felt like a tombstone. Without making a sound, I backed away from the door. Each step was a monumental effort. I got into my car, my hands shaking so badly I could barely fit the key in the ignition. I drove away, my vision blurred by tears I didn't even realize were falling. They weren't just plotting to take the money. They were plotting to erase me. The man I loved, the family I had tried so hard to be a part of, had just revealed themselves. They weren't family. They were predators. And I was their prey. My first call wasn't to Mark. It was to Chloe, my best friend since kindergarten, the one person who knew the real story of my life. "Something's happened," I choked out as soon as she answered. "I need you. Do not go home," she said, her voice fierce and immediate. "Come to my place. Right now. And you're calling that lawyer first thing in the morning." Sitting on Chloe's worn sofa, I replayed the conversation to Mr. Harrison over the phone. He was silent for a long moment. "Amelia," he said, his voice grim, "as of right now, that inheritance is what is legally known as a separate asset. It is yours and yours alone. It only becomes marital property if you commingle it, deposit it into a joint account, use it to buy a shared property. Do not, under any circumstances, do that." He advised me to act completely normal while we took steps to secure the funds. The next day, I went home. The act of walking through the door of the apartment I shared with Mark felt like stepping onto a stage. I had to give the performance of my life. When I told him the news, he put on a show worthy of an Oscar. His eyes went wide, his jaw dropped. He swept me up in a hug, spinning me around the kitchen. "Babe, this is unbelievable. We're rich," he shouted. His joy was loud, boisterous, and utterly fake. It was a nauseating parody of the moment I had dreamed of sharing with him just 24 hours earlier. As he went on and on about their future, the house, the business, the travel, I just smiled and nodded, a mask of happiness cemented on my face. Inside, I was calculating. I was watching. The loving husband was gone, replaced by a smiling thief. And he had no idea that I knew. The days that followed were a masterclass in psychological warfare. I lived a double life. On the surface, I was the dazed, grateful wife, overwhelmed by her good fortune and leaning on her supportive husband. I listened patiently as Mark laid out his grand plans, as Eleanor called daily with helpful suggestions, and as Jessica emailed introductions to trusted financial advisors. Each interaction was a fresh layer of betrayal, and I met it with a serene, slightly naive smile that seemed to lull their suspicions. Beneath the surface, I was a woman at war. With Mr. Harrison's guidance, I moved with quiet, methodical precision. The $5.2 million was transferred from Evelyn's estate account into a series of newly created trusts under my sole control, spread across 3 different financial institutions. The paperwork was ironclad. Then, I did something that felt both terrifying and liberating. I found a small, nondescript apartment on the other side of the city. I signed a 6-month lease under my name only. Over a series of shopping trips, I moved my most precious possessions there. Evelyn's letters, photos of my parents, my college diploma, and a small box of my own treasured books. The sterile, empty apartment became my secret sanctuary, my war room. The in-laws were getting impatient. Their cloying sweetness was beginning to curdle at the edges. Finally, Eleanor made her move. She announced she was hosting a family celebration dinner in my honor. "Just the closest family and friends, dear," she'd chirped over the phone. "A chance for us all to celebrate this wonderful new chapter together." I knew what it was. It was an ambush. They planned to corner me, to use the public setting and peer pressure to get me to sign the papers that would hand them my future. I agreed without hesitation. It was time to end the performance. The night of the dinner, I dressed carefully. Not in something expensive, but in a simple, elegant black dress Evelyn had given me years ago. It felt like armor. The atmosphere at Eleanor's house was thick with forced festivity. About 15 people were there, aunts, uncles, close family friends of theirs, all smiling, all oblivious. Mark stayed close to my side, his hand possessively on the small of my back. "Ready for our big night, babe?" he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. It made my skin crawl. We sat through a lavish dinner. They toasted to Evelyn's memory, to my good fortune, to family. The hypocrisy was so thick I could barely swallow my food. Finally, after dessert, Eleanor tapped her crystal glass with a spoon. She gave a saccharine speech about family unity and shared futures. Then Jessica, with a triumphant gleam in her eye, slid a handsome leather-bound folder across the polished mahogany table towards me. "Just a formality to get things started, honey," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Some standard paperwork for our family financial advisor to get the ball rolling on our joint accounts." All eyes were on me. This was the moment. The air crackled with expectation. Mark squeezed my hand, a gesture of final, silent command. I took a slow, deliberate breath and looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each of my tormentors. "Mark, Jessica, Eleanor." Then I gave him a small, sad smile. "You're right," I said softly, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "We should be completely transparent. Family shouldn't have secrets, after all." I reached into my purse, but I didn't pull out a pen. I pulled out my phone and a small, powerful Bluetooth speaker. I set them both on the table. I recorded a conversation a few weeks ago. I announced, my voice steady and clear. I was coming to share my good news, and I suppose I got some other news instead. I think everyone here should hear what this family's shared future really sounds like. Before they could react, I pressed play. The tinny, cruel sound of their own voices filled the opulent dining room. Jessica's sharp commands, Eleanor's greedy justifications, and finally Mark's chilling agreement. It's time I got what I'm owed. A collective gasp went through the room. The color drained from Mark's face, leaving it a pasty, slack-jawed mask of horror. Eleanor looked as if she'd been physically struck, her hand flying to her throat. Jessica's face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. The other guests stared, their forks frozen halfway to their mouths, their expressions shifting from confusion to shock to dawning disgust. When the recording ended, a deathly silence fell over the room. I stood up, my movements calm and unhurried. "The money is secure, in trust that none of you will ever touch," I said, my voice resonating with a strength I didn't know I possessed. "My lawyer has been fully briefed on your conspiracy to commit fraud. I believe the term is constructive fraud through undue influence. I'll let the legal term, a gift from Mr. Harrison, hang in the air." I looked directly at Mark. His eyes were wide with panic. "Mark," I said, and his name tasted like ash in my mouth, "you'll be hearing from my lawyer regarding a divorce. I pulled the diamond engagement ring and the simple gold wedding band from my finger. I placed them deliberately on the table, next to the untouched folder of documents. The clink they made was the loudest sound in the room. Then I turned and walked out, leaving absolute chaos and the ruins of their reputation smoldering behind me. The fallout was immediate and brutal. My phone was flooded with furious, threatening voicemails from Jessica and tearful, manipulative messages from Eleanor. But their public unmasking had done its job. They were exposed. However, they weren't finished. 2 days later, I received a curt email from the landlord of our old apartment. The locks had been changed at my husband's request. I was officially homeless. Then came the smear campaign. Suddenly, mutual friends were calling, their voices hesitant and confused. Had I really been seeing someone else? Was it true I'd always planned to leave Mark as soon as my grandmother died? The lies were vicious and designed to isolate me. But the final, most violating blow was yet to come. I had been so careful, moving the bulk of the inheritance immediately. But in the whirlwind of transfers, I had left a temporary holding account open, one containing the initial liquid assets from the estate, just over $300,000. I had planned to close it the following week. I sat down in my secret apartment to do just that, opened my laptop, and logged into my bank. My heart stopped. The balance, which should have been over $300,000, read $14.72. My blood ran cold. I clicked on the transaction history. A single wire transfer, made 2 hours earlier to an untraceable offshore account in the Cayman Islands. He had found it. But how? Then I saw the email. It was from Mark. The subject line was blank. The body contained a single, taunting sentence. Should have listened. Enjoy being alone. The air left my lungs. Spyware. He must have installed it on my laptop months, maybe years ago. All my new passwords, my careful planning, undone by a betrayal that had started long before the money was even on the table. The theft wasn't just about the money. It was a final, cruel act of violation, designed to break me completely. And in that moment, sitting on the floor of my empty apartment, surrounded by boxes, the full weight of his cruelty crashed down on me. I curled into a ball and sobbed, not for the money, but for the utter destruction of everything I had once believed in. He hadn't just stolen from me. He had hollowed me out, leaving me feeling defeated, stupid, and utterly, terrifyingly alone. I had hit rock bottom. The hours after discovering the theft were a black hole of despair. I sat on the cold floor of my bare apartment, the cruel echo of Mark's email playing on a loop in my head. He had won. He had managed to land one final, devastating blow, proving how deeply he had been deceiving me all along. The victory of the dinner party felt hollow, a fleeting moment of triumph before the final gut punch. I felt foolish and broken. Chloe came over and found me like that. She didn't offer platitudes. She just sat on the floor with me, made me drink a glass of water, and then said, "This isn't the end, Amelia. He took some money. He didn't take your soul. And he sure as hell didn't take Evelyn's spirit." Her words, especially the mention of my grandmother, stirred something deep inside me. After Chloe left, I was drawn to the last box I had yet to fully unpack. It was a simple cedar chest, where Evelyn kept her most precious mementos. I ran my hand over the worn wood, needing to feel a connection to her strength. Inside, amongst faded photographs and bundles of old letters tied with ribbon, was a book. It was a very old, leather-bound edition of Pride and Prejudice, her favorite novel. It felt heavier than it should. I opened it and my breath caught. The center of the book had been meticulously hollowed out. Nestled inside was a tarnished, old-fashioned skeleton key in another thick, cream-colored envelope, just like the one Mr. Harrison had given me. On it, in Evelyn's familiar script, were the words, "For my Amelia, on a rainy day." My hands trembled as I tore it open. It wasn't a long letter. "My dearest girl," it began, "if you are reading this, it means you've found yourself in a storm. I pray you never have to, but I have learned that it is wise to build a shelter before the rain begins. Greed is a poison, Amelia, and I always sensed a thirst for it in Mark's family. Years ago, Eleanor tried to persuade me to co-sign a very risky business loan for her husband. Her flattery was thick, but her math was weak. I refused. She never forgave me for seeing her so clearly. Never trust people who value appearances more than integrity. A cold validation washed over me. Evelyn had known. She had seen it all. The letter continued. This key opens safe deposit box number 417 at the downtown branch of Liberty Mutual Bank. Inside, you'll find a lifeline. Use it not to build walls, but to build a bridge to a life of your own making. And one last thing, should you ever need an honest witness to that family's character, contact your cousin David. Eleanor cast him out, but he has a spine of steel. Trust is the only currency that matters, my dear. Build a life with people who are worthy of yours. All my love, forever, Grandma. Tears, hot and fierce, spilled down my cheeks. But these were not tears of despair. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude and love. From beyond the grave, Evelyn had reached out and saved me. She had left me a map, a weapon, and a lifeline. The next morning, I walked into Liberty Mutual Bank. The safe deposit box was heavy. Inside, stacked in neat, currency-banded bundles, was cash. And underneath it, a portfolio of bearer bonds, untraceable and liquid as cash. It totaled $750,000. It wasn't just a rainy day fund. It was a testament to a grandmother's fierce, protective love. My next call was to David. I found his number through an old address book of Evelyn's. He was a contractor living 2 states away. He was wary at first, but when I told him who I was and what had happened, the ice in his voice melted. That sounds exactly like Aunt Eleanor, he said with a grim sigh. She disowned my side of the family when my dad refused to get involved in one of her husband's shady real estate schemes. Said we lacked family loyalty. He readily agreed to sign a sworn affidavit detailing his own experiences with Eleanor's financial manipulations and character. Armed with Evelyn's wisdom, a substantial new fortune, and a witness, the game changed. When Jessica came at me with legal threats of a protracted and messy divorce, claiming Mark was entitled to half the inheritance, Mr. Harrison calmly shut her down. He presented David's affidavit, referenced the recording of their conspiracy, and pointed out that the $300,000 theft was a felony that we were willing to overlook in exchange for a swift and clean divorce. They folded instantly. Mark signed the papers, getting nothing but the shame of his actions. Their reputation in the tight-knit community they cared so much about was irrevocably shattered. The story of the dinner party, it turned out, had spread like wildfire. I never pursued criminal charges for the theft. It was enough that they were gone. The money they stole was the price of my freedom, and I considered it a bargain. With the storm finally over, I began to build my bridge. I didn't buy a flashy car or a penthouse. I bought a modest but beautiful house with a large, neglected garden. The first thing I did was plant a rosebush, an old-fashioned, fragrant variety Evelyn would have loved. As my hands worked the soil, I felt her roots intertwining with my own, and I used the money to create something meaningful. I established the Evelyn Grant, a foundation that provides grants and scholarships for older women who, like her, had put their dreams on hold for their families and were now seeking to return to school or start a new career. The first grant went to a 62-year-old grandmother who wanted to get her nursing degree. Seeing the look on her face, the tears of joy and disbelief, felt more valuable than all the money in the world. My life is quiet now, but it is gloriously my own. It is filled with the scent of blooming roses, the warmth of true friends like Chloe and David, and the deep satisfaction of purpose. They tried to take my money, but what they really wanted was my silence, my compliance. They wanted me to believe I was worthless without them. In the end, I lost a husband and a family I never truly had, but I found my voice. I found my strength. I found myself. And that, I've learned, is priceless. It makes me wonder, how many of us have paid too high a price for a seat at the wrong table?